Seattle, 2025. A city of glass towers and quiet ambition, where reputations are currency and wealth defines belonging. In this polished world of influence and status, I, Alice Harper, 52 years old, was considered one of the fortunate ones. As the founder and CEO of Harper Designs, an interior design firm known for its sleek modern aesthetic and elite clientele, I had built my life on precision, trust, and taste. People often told me I had everything: a thriving company, a beautiful home overlooking Puget Sound, and a husband who had stood beside me for nearly 3 decades. That husband was Edward Harper, 54, Chief Financial Officer at a real estate corporation in downtown Seattle. To outsiders, Edward was the perfect partner. Elegant, intelligent, and loyal. We were the kind of couple featured in business magazines. The designer and the financier, a portrait of balance and success. At charity galas, he'd rest a hand on the small of my back, smiling for photographers as if our life together were as seamless as our matching tuxedos. Our son, Liam Harper, 30, had chosen a different path: psychology. I admired his calm nature, his empathy. He was newly married to Sophie Bennett, 28, a sharp, ambitious law associate with a disarming smile. I once told friends I was proud to have a lawyer in the family. It felt like our legacy of hard work was continuing. My circle was small but loyal. Tom Gwynn, my longtime accountant and friend, had been with me since the first day I opened my studio. And then there was Mike Carter, a private investigator I'd met through a client years ago, someone I'd soon need more than I could ever imagine. Back then, life appeared stable. A well-curated existence built on trust, partnership, and quiet luxury. Every morning, I'd sip coffee by the wide kitchen window, watching the sunlight slide across the bay, believing I'd already lived through my hardest battles. But I was wrong. Behind that perfect reflection in the glass, the cracks were already forming, silent, deliberate, and waiting to shatter everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. It happened on a quiet autumn afternoon, the kind of day when the air in Capitol Hill carried that crisp stillness before dusk. Alice had no reason to be there. She was simply driving home from a charity board meeting when fate took a cruel detour. Her car slowed as she turned onto the street where her son Liam lived, a familiar lane lined with maple trees glowing amber in the late light. That's when she noticed it. The black Range Rover parked neatly in front of Liam's gate. Her heart skipped. That car belonged to Edward, her husband of 27 years. But Edward had told her he was in Portland for a business trip. For a moment, Alice brushed it off as coincidence. Perhaps he'd dropped by to see their son. Yet something in her gut, that quiet, unexplainable instinct every woman learns to trust, told her this wasn't right. She parked down the street, her mind buzzing. From where she stood, she could see through the large bay window of Liam's living room, the curtains slightly parted. There, standing too close together, were Edward and Sophie, Liam's wife. Sophie's laughter was soft, conspiratorial, the kind that sent a chill down Alice's spine. Alice froze. Her pulse quickened as she edged closer, careful not to make a sound. Through the glass, she heard the words that would rip her world apart. "Once Alice signs those divorce papers," Sophie whispered, her voice laced with triumph, "everything will finally be ours." Edward chuckled, a sound she had once found comforting. Now it felt venomous. "I've already moved 50 grand into our joint account," he said smugly. 27 years pretending to be the perfect husband. It's finally paying off. Alice's knees weakened. For a moment the world blurred. Her husband, the man she had built her life around, was plotting with their daughter-in-law. The betrayal wasn't just romantic. It was strategic, cold, rehearsed. With trembling hands, she pulled her phone from her purse and pressed record. Every word, every cruel laugh was captured in that small device. Proof of a deception far deeper than she could have imagined. When she finally stumbled back to her car, her chest felt hollow. She sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel as tears blurred her vision. The memories came flooding back. Nights spent waiting for Edward to come home, the years she supported his career, the sacrifices she made to raise Liam while Edward chased his ambitions. Now it all made sense. The sudden business trips, the cold distance, the way Sophie had started wearing that smug, secretive smile. Alice realized she hadn't just been betrayed by her husband, she'd been outplayed in her own family. As she drove away from Capitol Hill, the recorder still running beside her, she whispered to herself through the sobs, "They think they buried me in silence. But silence can be broken." That moment, raw, brutal, unforgettable, was the beginning of her awakening. The woman who had once lived for others would soon learn to fight for herself. The days following that afternoon in Capitol Hill felt unreal. Like Alice was living inside a slow-motion nightmare. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Edward's laughter echoing in her mind, Sophie's words replaying like poison. "Once Alice signs those divorce papers, everything will finally be ours." But Alice wasn't the kind of woman who collapsed under betrayal. She had built a company from scratch, survived boardroom wars, and raised a son who once adored her. If life had taught her anything, it was that silence could be a weapon, and she was about to sharpen it. For the next week, she moved quietly. No accusations, no confrontation, just observation. She began digging into Edward's financial behavior, something she had rarely done in their marriage, trusting him with their shared investments. Now that trust was gone. What she found confirmed her worst fears. While reviewing the company's quarterly statements, Alice noticed something odd. A missing portion of equity, precisely 20% of shares from Aurelia Designs, the architecture firm she and Edward had co-founded 27 years ago. At first, she thought it was an accounting oversight. But a few calls later, the truth hit her like a punch to the chest. Edward had sold those shares, quietly without her consent, to Marlowe and Finch, one of their most aggressive competitors. The sale had been disguised under a shell corporation registered in Nevada, with Edward listed as a consultant. He hadn't just betrayed her heart. He was dismantling her legacy. Alice sat in her office, staring at the documents, her pulse pounding. If word got out that Aurelia Designs had lost 20% of its equity, their clients would panic. Investors would lose faith. Everything she had worked for could collapse overnight. That night, she called the one person she still trusted, Tom Nguyen. Tom had been her confidant for years, a financial advisor with the calm of a monk and the precision of a surgeon. Back in the early days, he had helped Alice set up offshore accounts in Singapore and Zurich to protect company profits from tax manipulation. She had never used them, but now those quiet safeguards suddenly felt like lifelines. When Tom arrived at her penthouse the next morning, he found Alice sitting at the kitchen island, surrounded by folders, printouts, and a half-empty glass of scotch. "I need you to tell me I'm wrong," she said, her voice cracking slightly. Tom flipped through the papers, his brow tightening. After a few minutes, he looked up and said quietly, "You're not wrong, Alice. You're in a chess match, and they've already made the first move." Alice exhaled shakily. "They're trying to corner me." Tom nodded. "Edward's not just cheating. He's repositioning. That sale to Marlowe and Finch isn't random. They've been after your firm for years. And Sophie." He hesitated. "She's smarter than you think. This isn't just an affair. It's a partnership." The words chilled her. Tom's tone was calm, but the message was terrifying. He leaned forward. "You can't wait. You need evidence, and you need it fast. Once he files for divorce, everything becomes harder to trace. You'll be locked out of key accounts." That's when Alice decided to take a step she never imagined. Hiring a private investigator. Enter Mike Carter, a former detective with a rough edge and a reputation for digging deep into corporate fraud. Tom made the introduction. Within hours of their first meeting, Alice handed Mike a retainer and a single instruction. Find out everything about Edward and Sophie, where the money's going, who they talk to, and what they're hiding. Mike didn't disappoint. Over the next few weeks, he followed the threads no one else could see. His updates came in short, coded messages and late-night calls. Each one peeled back another layer of deceit. First came Sophie. Mike discovered that she had been living far beyond her means. Despite having no significant income, her spending had skyrocketed: designer clothes, private spa retreats, and a Tesla registered under Liam's trust fund. When Mike traced the transactions, the trail led to something shocking. Sophie had embezzled over $120,000 from a trust Liam's grandparents had set up for him, the same fund meant for his future children's education. And then came Edward's secret. Through offshore banking records and encrypted transfers, Mike uncovered a hidden account in the Cayman Islands, under the name E. Harland Consulting Limited. The account held several deposits totaling over $480,000, traced back to consulting fees from Marlowe and Finch, the same company Edward sold Aurelia Design shares to. Alice's stomach turned when she heard it. That was the money he'd earned by betraying her. Blood money disguised as business income. One evening, Mike met her in a dimly lit cafe near the waterfront, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were screenshots, transaction histories, and even surveillance photos of Edward meeting with a Marlowe executive. "He's careful," Mike said, "but not invincible. They're planning something big, maybe a merger or a hostile takeover. You're being set up to lose control of your own company." Alice stared at the evidence, her hands trembling slightly. "If I expose this now, it could destroy the firm. But if I stay quiet..." Mike nodded. "Then they win." Tom, who had joined her that evening, leaned back and added quietly, "You don't need to strike yet. Let them believe they're safe. Gather everything. When you move, do it once and do it clean." Alice's silence spoke volumes. She wasn't just betrayed. She was outnumbered, but she wasn't outplayed yet. In the following days, she became two people: the composed wife who still smiled at charity galas, and the silent hunter working behind the scenes. Every interaction with Edward became a performance. Every kind word was a mask. At night, she reviewed documents with Tom. By day, she received coded reports from Mike. Together, they began to map Edward's moves like a war strategy. The tension grew unbearable. Alice's company faced internal rumors. Sophie, unaware that Alice knew the truth, began acting bolder, dressing like she owned the world, even making subtle comments at family dinners that stung like daggers. But Alice said nothing. Not yet. She was holding proof powerful enough to end both Edward and Sophie's schemes. A weapon forged in betrayal. Still, she couldn't act. Not publicly. Not until the timing was perfect. Because one mistake, one emotional outburst, could ruin everything she had built. And so, beneath her calm exterior, Alice carried the weight of her secret. A truth that could destroy lives, including her own. The storm was building. And she was standing right at its quiet, deliberate center. The first fracture appeared on an ordinary Thursday evening. Alice had just returned from a silent dinner with Edward, pretending, yet again, that their life was still intact. The city outside her window pulsed with rain, neon and noise, but inside, everything felt eerily still. Then her phone buzzed. It was Liam. Her son rarely called at that hour. He usually texted. The tremor in his voice told her something wasn't right. "Mom," he began carefully, "I know this might sound strange, but has Dad been acting off lately?" Alice's grip on the phone tightened. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Sophie's been asking me questions about you. About the company. Things like who owns the trademarks, where the contracts are stored. I thought she was just curious, but then she mentioned that Dad said something about restructuring the business after the settlement." "What settlement, Mom?" Alice froze. The word settlement stabbed through her composure. "Maybe you misunderstood," she said softly, keeping her voice steady. But Liam wasn't convinced. "I don't think I did. Sophie's been different lately. Secretive. And Dad's avoiding my calls. Something's going on." He hesitated, lowering his tone. "Mom, I think Dad's hiding something." Alice wanted to protect him, to keep him outside the circle of deceit that had already poisoned her world. She had always seen Liam as the best part of her life. The gentle, analytical boy who became a psychologist because he wanted to understand why people hurt each other. She couldn't bear the thought of him being shattered by the same truth that haunted her. So she lied. "Everything's fine, honey. You know your father, he's probably just stressed. The business world never sleeps." But Liam didn't sound convinced. "I know stress, Mom. This isn't stress. This is strategy." That night, Alice lay awake staring at the ceiling. She could almost hear Edward's voice from that cursed afternoon echoing in her mind. Alice doesn't suspect a thing. For weeks she'd carried that secret alone, But now her son's instincts were closing in on it. 3 days later, Liam showed up at her office unannounced. He looked tense, his jaw set, his eyes sharp with worry. "I can't shake it, Mom. Sophie keeps talking about how things will change soon. She's even been meeting with Dad after hours. Without telling me." Alice felt her chest tighten. "Liam." But he cut her off. "Please don't protect me. If something's wrong, I need to know." His words pierced through her silence. She'd built her entire life around protecting him from chaos, first from the financial struggles of their early years, then from the marital cracks that had begun forming long before he ever noticed. But now he was a man. A son, yes, but also a truth seeker. She sighed, walking toward the bookshelf in her office, where she kept a small silver voice recorder hidden behind a row of design journals. She held it in her palm for a moment, her reflection faintly visible in the metal surface. When she turned back to him, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You said you wanted the truth. I'm not sure you're ready for it, but here it is." She pressed play. Edward's voice filled the room, rich, confident, and cruelly familiar. "Alice doesn't suspect a thing. Once she signs the divorce papers, the rest is just paperwork." Then Sophie's laugh followed, sharp and smug. 27 years of pretending to be the perfect husband finally paid off. Liam's face drained of color. His breathing quickened. For a few seconds he stood frozen, as if the words refused to sink in. Then slowly his expression changed, from disbelief to pain and finally to fury. "He said you didn't suspect anything," Liam whispered, his voice trembling. He said that." Alice nodded silently, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. Liam turned away, running a hand through his hair, pacing. "I knew Sophie was up to something, but Dad? I looked up to him, Mom. I thought he was the one man who'd never." He broke off mid-sentence, unable to finish. She reached for him, but he stepped back, shaking his head, his expression carved with resolve. No, I'm not letting them get away with this. You've done enough protecting, Mom. It's my turn now." Alice could see the fire in his eyes, the same determined spark she'd once seen in herself when she built her company from nothing. "Liam, listen to me," she pleaded. "If you confront them now, they'll twist everything. You'll become part of their plan. I need time to build this case quietly." But Liam's mind was already made up. "Mom, you gathered evidence. You endured this alone. I can't just sit here while they destroy everything you've built. Everything we are." That evening, he went home to face Sophie. The moment he stepped through the door, Sophie looked up from her laptop, smiling the same flawless smile that used to charm him. "Hey, you're home early. I was just—" "Cut it, Sophie," Liam interrupted, his tone icy. "I know." Her smile faltered. "Know what?" He tossed his phone onto the table. "That you and my father are scheming behind my mother's back. That you've been using me to get information about her assets." Sophie froze. For a split second, her mask slipped. Then she recovered, her voice calm and clipped. "You're mistaken. Whatever you think you heard." "I heard him," Liam snapped. "On tape. Talking about how Mom doesn't suspect anything. How you two just have to wait for her to sign the divorce papers. How you'll have it all." Sophie's face went pale. "She played you that recording?" "She didn't have to. You already did." His voice cracked with fury. "You lied to me, Sophie. For what? Money? Power? Was any of this real?" For a long moment, silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Then Sophie said quietly, "You don't understand. Your father promised." "Stop calling him my father," Liam cut in, his voice shaking. "He stopped being that the moment he decided to destroy my mother." He took a step back, his eyes glistening. "I'm giving you one chance, Sophie. End this. Walk away from whatever plan you and Edward have, or this marriage ends tonight." Sophie didn't answer. Her silence was answer enough. When Liam walked out of that house, the world he knew was gone. The woman he thought he loved had betrayed him, and the father he once admired had become a stranger. That night, he called his mother again. His voice was steady now, not broken but hardened. "Mom, I'm with you. Whatever it takes, I won't let them hurt you again." Alice felt both pride and sorrow swell in her chest. The war that had once been hidden in whispers was now out in the open. The Harper family had officially turned on itself, and as the rain battered against her windows, Alice knew there was no going back. The line between love and betrayal had been crossed, and the next move would decide everything. The storm broke not in the sky, but in court. 2 weeks after Liam's confrontation with Sophie, Alice received a formal notice from the King County Superior Court. The letterhead was official, the language cold and precise. Notice of Emergency Protective Order, alleging financial abuse and emotional distress. Alice read it twice, her pulse tightening with each line. They moved first. Edward and Sophie had filed a claim accusing her of mismanaging family assets, coercing Edward financially, and manipulating Liam's inheritance. It was a strategy designed to cripple her reputation, freeze her accounts, and make her look unstable. Exactly what they needed to seize control of her empire. It was a brutal move, but Alice had anticipated it. When she met with Tom Gwynn and Mike Carter in her office that evening, the air smelled faintly of rain and espresso. Tom, calm as ever, flipped through the legal documents. "Classic preemptive strike," he muttered. "They're trying to force the narrative before you do. If this holds up, your business accounts could be frozen." Mike leaned back, arms crossed. "But they don't know you've got 47 minutes of them plotting their downfall." Alice stared at the recorder on her desk, that small silver device that had become both her weapon and her salvation. "We go to court," she said quietly. "No more waiting." The courtroom smelled of polished wood and tension. Rows of spectators whispered among themselves. Some journalists, others colleagues curious to see the drama unfold. Edward sat at the plaintiff's table, tailored suit impeccable, expression composed but tight. Sophie, in a sleek gray blazer, looked every bit the poised young attorney, except for the faint tremor in her hands. When Alice entered, heads turned. She looked calm, elegant, unbroken, the kind of presence that filled the room without needing to speak. Her lawyer placed a reassuring hand on her arm, but she didn't need reassurance. She was ready. The hearing began with Judge Eleanor Brooks, a woman in her 60s known for her sharp mind and zero tolerance for theatrics. She adjusted her glasses, eyes sweeping the courtroom. "Mr. and Mrs. Harper," she began coolly, "this is not a spectacle. We will hear evidence and we will seek the truth. Nothing more." Edward stood, his tone measured and confident. "Your Honor, my wife has a history of controlling behavior. She's used our finances to manipulate me and isolate our family. I'm asking for a protective order to ensure my emotional and financial safety." The performance was flawless, the polished speech of a man who'd spent his career managing investors and optics. Sophie nodded beside him, eyes downcast in a carefully crafted display of victimhood. Alice listened in silence, every word slicing at her patience. For 27 years, she had watched this man charm boardrooms and lie with grace. But not today. Not anymore. When her turn came, she rose slowly, her voice steady but resonant. "Your Honor," she began, "I have no interest in destroying Edward, but I do have a duty, to the truth and to the life I built." She reached into her briefcase and placed the voice recorder on the evidence table. This recording contains 47 minutes of conversation between Edward Harper and Sophie Bennett, his daughter-in-law. It details their plan to defraud me, transfer company assets, and frame me as unstable. I submit it as Exhibit A. The courtroom went utterly still. Judge Brooks raised a brow. "Proceed." The audio filled the room, the faint hum of background noise, then Edward's unmistakable voice. "Once she signs the divorce papers, everything will fall into place. Alice won't suspect a thing." Then Sophie's reply. "Her company's worth $15 million. Add the real estate, that's at least 25 total. She'll hand it all over, and we'll be set." The gallery gasped. Even the court clerk stopped typing for a moment. Edward's mask cracked. He shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. Sophie's complexion drained of color. Alice didn't look at them. She just stared straight ahead at the judge, at the truth finally set free. The recording continued, damning them word by word. Mentions of offshore transfers. Edward bragging about moving 50 grand to Sophie's account. Sophie mocking Alice's trust. And then, the line that silenced the entire courtroom. 27 years pretending to be the perfect husband. Worth every second. The air in the room thickened. You could hear the rain outside tapping against the courthouse windows, a quiet rhythm against the chaos inside. When the audio ended, Judge Brooks sat back, expression unreadable. "Mr. Harper," she said evenly, "do you wish to respond?" Edward stood, his composure gone. "That recording, it's taken out of context." "Out of context?" Judge Brooks's tone cut like glass. "Mr. Harper, this is not a negotiation. You are heard in your own voice, conspiring to commit financial fraud against your spouse. And Ms. Bennett," she turned to Sophie, "you are a member of the bar, are you not?" Sophie nodded faintly, her lips trembling. "Then you should understand the gravity of conspiring to defraud a client's trust, particularly a family member. This is beyond civil dispute. This borders on criminal conduct." Edward opened his mouth again, but the judge raised a hand. "Enough." Her gavel struck once. "The petition for a protective order is hereby denied. This court will not be used as a tool for manipulation. Furthermore, this matter is being referred to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into perjury and fraudulent misrepresentation." The words hit like thunder. Edward's shoulders slumped, his carefully curated image collapsing before everyone's eyes. Sophie covered her face, whispering something under her breath. A desperate, silent plea that went unanswered. Reporters began scribbling furiously. Cameras clicked outside the door. The very reputation they tried to protect, the illusion of success and sophistication, was now in ruins. Alice sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. There was no triumph in her expression, only a deep, quiet exhaustion. Justice wasn't victory, it was survival. As court adjourned, Edward turned toward her one last time. His eyes were red, hollow, stripped of arrogance. "You ruined me," he whispered. Alice met his gaze without blinking. "No, Edward. You ruined yourself." Sophie didn't speak. As she walked out beside him, her once perfect posture faltered under the weight of everything she'd lost. Her career, her marriage, her name. Outside, the Seattle sky opened up. Rain poured down the courthouse steps, washing over the marble like a quiet cleansing. Alice stepped into it, lifting her face toward the gray. For the first time in months, she didn't feel trapped by silence or fear. The storm had passed, and with it, the last illusion of the life she thought she had. Inside that courtroom, truth had won, not with anger, but with evidence, courage, and a woman's unshakable will to defend what was hers. Karma has a quiet way of balancing the scales, and for Edward and Sophie, it came not in thunder but in silence that stripped them bare. Edward's downfall was the first to unfold. Once the charming face of a family empire, he now sat across a polished mahogany table in his lawyer's office, his hands trembling as the verdict was read. The prenuptial agreement he had once mocked, calling it a formality for insecure people, now became his only lifeline. According to that contract, he was entitled to just a fraction of the estate, barely enough to sustain the lavish lifestyle he once flaunted. Overnight, his penthouse was listed for sale. The tabloids that once celebrated him now printed his humiliation across front pages. Architect of his own ruin. Sophie's collapse came soon after. Her name, once engraved on the glass door of her boutique law firm, was now etched in disciplinary reports. Investigators discovered she had misappropriated funds from a trust she managed, money used to finance her secret lifestyle with Edward. The Bar Association revoked her license permanently. The final hearing was broadcast live, her voice cracking as she pleaded that it was a momentary lapse. But the world had stopped listening. Liam, her husband, filed for divorce 2 days later. Yet Liam didn't disappear into bitterness. Instead, he redirected his pain into purpose, founding a small counseling center for victims of psychological manipulation and betrayal. He named it the Clarity Room, a quiet nod to the light that comes only after illusion burns away. And then there was Alice. Her return wasn't triumphant in a loud or vengeful way. It was measured, poised, and radiant. When the court cleared her name, clients who had once doubted her loyalty began reaching out again. Within weeks, she had regained control of her company. The office she walked into that morning wasn't just a building. It was a battlefield she had reclaimed. Her employees greeted her with tears and applause. Contracts poured in, not from pity but from respect. At home, overlooking the tranquil waters of Puget Sound, Alice rediscovered a rhythm of peace. The world outside buzzed with scandal and gossip, but inside her cedar-framed home, silence felt sacred again. Some evenings she sat by the large window, a cup of chamomile tea in her hand, watching the light fade into the water. She no longer carried anger toward Edward or Sophie. Their choices had destroyed themselves without her having to lift a hand. What remained within her was clarity about who she was, what she stood for, and what kind of peace cannot be bought or broken by anyone else. Her story wasn't one of revenge. It was a story of reclamation, of dignity, integrity, and the quiet power of truth. In the end, Alice didn't need justice to be served publicly. She only needed to walk through her life with her head high and her heart finally still. The courtroom battles, the betrayals, and the long nights of doubt had all faded into memory now. What remained was the quiet understanding that not every story of love ends with forgiveness, and not every wound must be healed by another person. Alice stood once more by her window, watching the first rays of dawn break over Puget Sound. The reflection of light across the calm water mirrored her own transformation. She no longer felt the urge to prove herself or to win against those who had wronged her. Victory, she realized, wasn't about revenge, it was about peace. In a voice soft but steady, she reflected, "I once believed love could save everything, but sometimes, it's the truth and self-respect that save us from losing ourselves." Her words carried the weight of a woman who had walked through fire and emerged intact. Not untouched, but stronger, clearer, and finally whole. The truth had cost her comfort, illusions, and people she once thought she couldn't live without. Yet in return, it gave her something infinitely more valuable: the freedom to live without fear. Alice's story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about awakening, about the strength to stand alone without bitterness, about understanding that dignity is love directed inward. And as the wind brushed against the glass, she smiled, not because life had been kind, but because she had learned to be kind to herself. Her final lesson echoed like a gentle truth: when love turns to deception, don't chase closure from others. Find it within. The most powerful ending isn't revenge, it's peace. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support more stories about resilience, justice, and self-respect. Every comment, every share helps this channel continue telling the voices of those who found strength after betrayal and peace after pain. Tell us, what part of Alice's journey moved you the most? Share your thoughts below. Your words might inspire someone who needs courage today. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for believing that truth always finds its way home.